To the question of whether the Christians at Corinth can eat the meat that is offered to idols, Paul has reviewed the argument and put the case that part of their thinking was not right. An idol is nothing, and meat offered to idol is not changed. It doesn't become bad for you. So from that point of view, there's no problem eating meat offered to idols. But there is a problem, because some people recognise the idol, and if they see you eating the meat, they will think you are worshipping the idol, and you will be sinning against them because you're confirming them in a false idea. Just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. Paul claims he is free, he's an apostle, he is a senior person, he can do what he wants. But he doesn't do what he wants. He makes himself a servant of others, that he might win some for Christ. He doesn't indulge in having a wife to make life easier for himself for the sake of the ministry. And he gives examples in the Old Testament of the fact that, yes, all those Israelites came out of Egypt, but with most of them God was not well pleased, and their bodies fell in the wilderness because they continually rebelled against God. The promise was that they could come into the promised land, a land of milk and honey, but they didn't want that promised land. They kept turning back to Egypt. They kept complaining about the journey that God was taking them on, and so they fell. These things were written not just to document the history, but to give us examples that we can learn from them. And so the exhortation at the first part of chapter 10 of 1 Corinthians was, "Let him who thinks he stands take heed lest he fall. No temptation has overtaken you except such as is common to man. But God is faithful, who will not allow you to be tempted beyond what you are able, but with the temptation will also make the way of escape, that you may be able to bear it." The areas of temptation that is listed are sexual immorality, and he'd already addressed that issue in the first part of the epistle. Idolatry, which is the current subject, and the third area was the fact that they complained, and God judged them for complaining. God is trying to free us from the bondage to this world, that we might have the liberty of the children of God. And if we complain about that, then we are not entering into it. So, reading from verse 14 of 1 Corinthians, Paul brings a conclusion to the matter. "Therefore, my beloved, flee from idolatry. I speak as to wise men. Judge for yourselves what I say. The cup of blessing which we bless, is it not the communion of the blood of Christ? The bread which we break, is it not the communion of the body of Christ? For we, though many, are one bread and one body, for we all partake of that one bread. Observe Israel after the flesh. Are not those who eat the sacrifices partakers of the altar? What am I saying then? That an idol is anything, or what is offered to idols is anything? Rather, that the things which the Gentiles sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And we do not want you to have fellowship with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the Lord's table and of the table of demons. Or do we provoke the Lord to jealousy? Are we stronger than he? All things are lawful to me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful to me, but not all things edify. Let no one seek his own, but each one the other's well-being. Eat whatever is sold in the marketplace, asking no questions for conscience sake, for the earth is the Lord's and all its fullness. If any of those who do not believe invites you to dinner, and you desire to go, eat whatever is set before you, asking no question for conscience sake. But if anyone says to you, 'This was offered to idols,' do not eat it, for the sake of the one who told you, and for conscience sake. For the earth is the Lord's, and all its fullness. Conscience, I say, not your own, but that of the other. For why is my liberty judged by another man's conscience? But if I partake with thanks, why am I evil spoken of for the food over which I give thanks? Therefore, whether you eat or drink or whatever you do, do all to the glory of God. Give no offence either to the Jews or to the Greeks or to the church of God, just as I please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of many, that they may be saved. My name's Arthur, and I thank you for joining me as we share these verses together. Paul is now summarising the argument that he has made. He said previously, flee immorality. He's saying flee from idolatry. Because we participate in the worship of the Lord. When we have communion, the Lord's Supper, we have communion with the blood of Christ when we drink the cup of blessing. And when we break bread, we have communion with the body of Christ. Because every Christian is built together into one body, and that is symbolised by the bread that we share together. And in eating this food together, we are symbolising that unity that we have with Christ. If we go then to the pagan temple and eat there of the sacrifices that they have made, we are having fellowship with them. We are partaking of that altar. But we would argue that as Christians we have nothing to do with it. There's a contradiction there. No, there is a fault in the argument that an idol is nothing, because indeed the idol is nothing, but the worship of the idol is because there is a demon there that has set it up as an alternative to God. And so we sacrifice to demons when we participate in a sacrifice in a pagan temple. And it's inconceivable that we should seek to have fellowship with demons and with Christ. Demons are in rebellion against Christ. They do not recognise him. And so Paul says you cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You must choose. And if we do partake of the Lord's table and the table of demons, we are challenging God, and we are asking God to judge us. We are provoking him to jealousy. So the summary is, yes, all things are lawful. We're not under law, but we're under grace. But that doesn't mean we should do everything. Not all things are helpful, and not everything is edifying. Our focus is not just on ourselves, but on caring for others. So, for meat that's in the marketplace, even though it may have been offered to an idol in the process, we shouldn't worry ourselves with questions. We're just buying some food. It belongs to the Lord, and we can eat it. We don't need to what the process has been. I mentioned another day the issue of most meat in Australia is from animals that were slaughtered with prayers to Allah. But if we buy it in the butcher shop, we don't need to ask about that. We can just buy the meat. And if we are invited to go to eat with somebody, we are to eat whatever they give us. Unless, of course, they make an issue of the fact we are having a celebration to worship the idol and we invite you to our celebration. That's the situation where you cannot eat because they believe in the idol. But in every other circumstance where that is not the issue, then by all means partake with thanks. The point is that we are not living to please ourselves. Whatever we do, whether we eat or drink, do all to the glory of God. And don't upset the Jews, and don't upset the Greeks, and don't upset the Church of God. Just as Paul seeks to please all men, not by speaking the things that they want to hear, but by seeking the profit of many, that many may be saved. Ultimately, the earth is the Lord's, and all its fullness. Therefore, let us give thanks to him and eat.